Hi guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make this 3D minion, and we're going to make this exact one, this one-eyed minion, and you're going to need a total of 116 bands, 1 gray, 1 white, 28 blacks, 41 blues, and 45 yellow. The blue that I used here is ocean blue if you want to use the same color, and this one is neon blue. In the video, I'm going to briefly show you how to put on the 2-eye for the 2-eyed minion, and if you're making the 1-eyed minion, you can skip over that part. So let's get started. First, we're going to make the fingers, and we're going to make him have 3 little fingers, and we're going to make knots. So taking a single band, we're going to loop it from the second peg from the bottom and twist to the left, creating an X in the center over the bottommost peg, twist to the right, and then loop that band over the second peg from the bottom. Now on the left side of the loom, we're going to pull the bottom loop up and over to the center, creating a knot, and reach under on the other side, grabbing the bottom loop and creating that knot for the finger. And I already made 2. You need 3 for each finger, so you'll have to pause the video to make a total of 6 for all the fingers. Once you have your knots for your fingers, you're going to need a total of 6, 3 for each hand, taking 2 single bands, and we're going to pull all those loops onto the 2 single bands. So you want to pull a total of 3 knots onto the 2 single bands, creating your finger like that. Now taking your skin color, which is yellow, twist double, and pulling all those loops onto that single we doubled. And we'll do that 2 more times. Taking a single, twist double, pull the loops onto that single we doubled, push it around so it's not twisted, and getting it onto our hook. One last time, single, twist, double, so that's what your arm should look like, and getting it onto a single yellow band. So go ahead and pause the video to make 2 hands and come back when you're done. Now let's make the logo. I'm taking 2 single bands, 1 black and 1 ocean blue, looping it from the second peg from the bottom, twist to the left, creating an X, twist to the right, and then looping it back onto the second peg from the bottom. Like that. And once again, from the left side of our loom, we're grabbing the bottom 2 loops and pulling it up and over to the center, and repeat for the one that's on the second peg from the bottom. Grab the bottom 2 loops and pull it up and over to the center. And we are going to get that onto our hook. So that's the logo, and getting it onto a single band, and put it aside to add to our body later. Let's make the eye. We're going to take a single white band and looping it 4 times on a hook, taking a single black band, twist double, and we're going to pull the 4 loops onto our single we doubled onto a hook like that, and we're going to put it onto a yellow band, that's the color of our face, and set it aside to add to our body later. If you're doing the 2-eyed minion, then go ahead and pause the video to make your second eye real quick. Let's make the boots, and it's really easy. I'm taking a single band, black, looping it 4 times on your hook, taking 2 single bands and pulling all the loops onto the 2 single bands and getting it onto a hook. And make sure you center it. Taking a single band, twist double, and pulling all the loops off of your hook and onto the single we doubled. And finally, getting a single band, that's the color of our suit, twist double, and getting the loops onto that blue single double band. And let's set it aside on a holding instrument to add to our body later. You can also just leave it on the hook, it's up to you. So there are my boots. Now let's make our minion, taking 2 single yellow bands, and we're going to cover 6 pegs. So looping from 1, twist in the center, and looping it across. Once again, taking 2 single bands, twist, and looping it across. Last 2 single bands, looping it from 1 peg, twist in the center to the other one. So that's what yours should look like. And if you're working on a monster tail, you can just loop it to the side, like that. Now row number 2, we're taking 6 single bands to cover our 6 pegs, and then we're looping the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push it down, check to make sure you have 2 loops left per peg. Now let's expand, and we're going to pull these 2 loops off of the 3rd side peg if you're working on the monster tail, and we're going to move it to the 4th center peg. If you're on the loom and these 2 bands are on the center 3rd, just move that off onto the center 4th peg. And I'm going to move this band off, it's just in the way. Now I'm going to take a single loop off of the 2nd side peg that's attached to the 1st and moving it to the 3rd. So go on the side, grabbing the top loop, and check to make sure it's attached to the 1st side peg, and this one is, so I'm pulling it to the 3rd. So my 2nd and 3rd each has a loop. Repeat on the other side, pull off the top loop. Repeat on the right side, pull off the top loop, and it happens to be attached to the 1st side peg, and I'm going to move that band to the 3rd. So that's what yours should look like. Now we're covering 8 pegs. Now we're going to use black, taking a single black, 8 of them, and we're going to loop it around our loom, covering our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom bands up and over to the center. The 1st side peg should have 2 loops, pull that up and over to the center. The 2nd and 3rd should have a single loop, pull it up and over to the center, and you should have 2 loops left per peg. Go around your loom, grabbing the bottom bands, up and over to the center. Push it down, and you should have 2 loops left on each peg. Now we're going to add the eyes. This is for the 2-eyed minion only. You're going to loop your eye on the 1st center to the side 1st peg, and you're going to repeat that for the other eye. So that's what yours should look like. For the rest, we're going to take 6 single bands to cover the rest of the 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Loop the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And unlike the one-eyed minion, you don't have to worry about pulling that one eye out every single time. And the rest of the step is the same. You just have to loop all the bands around like I'm doing the one-eyed one, and you don't have to worry about the single eye being pulled out. Since I'm making the one-eyed minion, I'm going to loop my eye from the first right to the first left peg. That's what yours should look like to make the one-eye minion. And then pulling the eye above the first center peg, like that. And then you're going to take 8 single bands. You should be using yellow to cover your 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And if you're making the 2-eyed minion, then these 3 pegs should already have the bands for the eyes, and you don't have to add all 8, you just do 6 around the rest of your loom. Now go around grabbing the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And for the first center peg, we'll do it a little different. We're going to pull our eye out so that way it's not in the way, and we're going to go inside, grabbing the bottom 2 loops, the black one, and pulling up and over to the center. So our eye is still on the outside of that first center peg, and we didn't loop anything. It should be like that. Push it down. That was row number 4. Row 5 will do the same thing, taking 8 single bands, covering our 8 pegs. And then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. The first side peg should have 3 loops on it because we added our eye, so we're going to loop those 3 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left on that peg. Just going around, grabbing the bottom 2 bands and looping it up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops per peg. Once again, the right first peg should have 3 loops. Just pull that up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops. For the first center peg, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to reach in between, pull our eye out, grabbing the bottom 2 bands, and loop up and over to the center. So our eye is still out here on the outside of our first center peg, and it will always be like that. You never loop this eye up. So that was row number 5. Row 6, we're going to add the jumpsuit. So we're taking a single blue band and looping it from the first center to the side first peg for both sides. Repeating for the back, taking a single blue band, looping it from the 4th center to the side 3rd peg. So that's what yours should look like. Now for the sides, we're taking a yellow band and covering those pegs for both sides. Now to make the strap for the blue jumpsuit, we're taking 2 blue bands and we're going to loop it on all 3 pegs. So taking your 2 blue bands and looping it across those 3 pegs, like that. Repeat for the other side, 2 blue bands, looping it across all 3 pegs. So that's what yours should look like. And now let's loop. And pay attention, we're going to pull our strap back and we're going to grab the bottom 2 bands for the first left peg and loop it up and over to the center. And we did not loop the strap. The strap is still loose on the outside. Repeat for the other pegs. We're going to pull the strap back, grabbing the bottom 2 bands and loop up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops. Same thing for the side 3rd peg. We're pulling the strap back, grabbing the bottom 2 loops and pull it up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops on that peg. Go to the center 4th peg, grabbing the bottom 2 loops and pulling it up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left on that peg. Once again, on the right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull the strap out, so we're not looping it. Hold it down. We're going to pull the bottom 2 loops off of the 3rd side peg and loop it up and over to the center. And our strap is still loose. Go to the center 2nd peg, grabbing the bottom 2 loops and pull it up and over to the center. And repeat for the first side peg, pulling the bottom 2 loops up and over to the center. And our strap is still loose. For the first center peg, same thing, we're going to pull our eye down, grabbing the bottom 2 loops and pull it up and over, leaving 2 blue loops left on that peg. Push everything down. That was row number 6. Row 7, same thing, we're going to take 2 single blue bands and putting it on the center first to the side 1st peg and 2 more on the bottom pegs, like that. Now taking your arms and we're going to attach it on the left 1st to 2nd peg and your other arm on the right 1st to 2nd peg on the loom, and then taking a single yellow and looping it from the 2nd to the 3rd side peg for both sides. So that's what yours should look like. Now once again, we're going to pull our strap down. We are not looping it. Hold it down, grabbing the bottom 2 loops and pull it up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Repeat for the other pegs, making sure you're not looping the strap. Hold it down. Go around your loom, repeating the same thing on the other side. Make sure the strap's out of the way. We're only looping the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Same thing with the center 1st peg, pulling your eye down, grabbing the bottom 2 loops, pulling up and over to the center. For row number 8, we're going to add our logo and we're going to loop it from the first left peg to the first right peg, like that, like our eye, and then we're pulling it over the first center peg. Now taking 8 single bands, we're going to cover our 8 pegs and looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Once again, we do not want to loop up our strap. Hold it down if you're going to get confused, grabbing the bottom 2 loops up and over to the center. And the first side peg should have 3 loops because of the logo. And just go around our loom, grabbing the bottom 2 bands up and over. Do not loop up the strap. Same thing on the other side, pull your strap down, only grabbing the bottom 2 bands and leaving 2 loops left per peg. Now for the first center peg, like the eye, we're going to pull our logo down and our eye, and we're going to grab the bottom 2 loops and pull it up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left on that peg, and our logo is loose like our eye. That was row number 8. Row number 9, we're going to take 8 blue bands covering our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And remember, the first side peg will have 3 loops because of the logo. So go under, make sure you're not looping your strap, pull it down if you have to, grabbing the bottom 3 loops for the first side peg because of the logo, looping it up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left on that peg. Just go around your loom. Once again, do not grab your strap. Remember, the first right peg also has 3 loops to pull up and over to the center, and you should have 2 loops left. And for the first center peg, same thing, go under, pull your logo down, grabbing only the bottom 2 loops, up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops, and the logo and the eyes are still loose. Row 10, repeat the same process, looping 8 single bands around our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over the same way. Don't loop the logo or the straps up. So now let's add the feet. We're going to get the loops onto our hook, off of our holding hook or instrument. Let's get both onto our hook. And we're going to attach our feet on the 2 loops off of the first side peg. So taking the 2 loops off of the first side peg and pull the legs onto the 2 loops and reattaching it to the first side peg. Repeat for the other side, pulling the 2 loops off of the first side peg, putting our legs onto those 2 loops and reattaching it. So that's what yours should look like, and your legs should be out towards the front. Now if you're working on the monster tail, go ahead and stuff the inside. But if you're not, go ahead and take the 2 loops off of each peg. Make sure you're only grabbing the 2 loops and not the straps or the eye or the logo. Just grabbing the 2 loops that's on each peg, getting it onto a hook, and I'm going clockwise around my loom. Once again, only grabbing the 2 loops, not the eye or the logo, onto my hook. Making sure my feet and my fingers and arms and everything are on the outside, and then get the strap and the eyes and everything off the loom. So there's our minion so far, and let's stuff him. I have some of these bands, and you can stuff them with whatever you have. Just push it inside our body. Make sure you get it to the top of the head. It's pretty far up there, but don't overstuff them. So there's your minion, and let's take a single band and pulling all the loops off of the hook and onto the single band to tie a slip knot to cinch him off. And tuck in your charm string or your slip knot band. Fix your logo so it's in place. You can split out his eyes so the middle shows for his eyes, taking a single gray band or whatever. If you have silver, that's great. We're just going to make a cap around the eye, so looping it, twisting it once and looping it back around our eye to create the goggle, making sure it's even and splitting out the white of our eye. So there's 2 loops on either side. For the 2-eyed minion, we're going to take a single gray band and we're going to cross it in the center, making an X, covering our eyes and getting it behind the white of his eye. So that's the first layer, and if that's enough for you, you can just leave it like that, or you can just take 2 gray bands and cross it, and that'll be the goggles. I'm going to take a single gray for each eye, and I'm going to cap it off by looping it over once to give it more of a thicker goggle look. Pull the eyes up and out so the gray band doesn't pop over. So that's one eye. For the other eye, same thing, we're taking a single gray band and twist and cap it off. Pull the eye out, especially the black, and get the white on top of the gray. Pull the center black out. So there are our minions. I hope you like them. Thanks for watching.